So, you're Lawrence McClellan, and you're a barber around here, right? In Portland, Oregon.
That's right. I'm not barbering. I mean, I kind of do a few haircuts here and there in my home, but I'm kind of just helping take care of my wife until her medical's a little bit better. So
Okay.
But other than that, I'm pretty active in my church. Play drums, make beats and stuff on the side. Blog, do my thing with you, stuff like that. Take care of my son.
Yeah.
You know, just pretty normal, average stuff, I guess.
But you're kind of unusual as a human being, because you have all these ideas about different topics, and you have a memoir you're working on as well. You have a book you're working on.
Yeah. It's called A Glimpse of Peace.
A Glimpse of Peace.
Right. And it's supposed to be about my journey as far as being a 19-year-old African-American male who happened to come from a predominant African-American environment, but seemed to be interested in white America. And it was kind of ironic because during that time would be, the late 80s, early 90s, and during that time, blacks and whites were still not quite yet on that unity level like the way they may be now. And I know that's probably hard to think of that, but it was actually worse than what it is right now, maybe 15 years ago. So I wanted to write a book that would talk about what that was like being an African-American male and not being able to have that same negative feeling towards white people that most other African-Americans had. So, and I wanted to show in my book the adversities I had to deal with African Americans as well as white people, because of course there were still both sides that still were not in agreement with blacks and whites being friends or dating or things like that. And then my book also talks about my struggles and situations that I experienced as I experimented with different drugs throughout my 20s. Basically, I call it the wild years.
Of course.
But and then the book basically goes into my consequences of being living a wild, chaotic life and being around crazy people, and then me kind of getting an epiphany to where I realized that this was a road that I didn't want to stay on no more. And then there's this transition stage of me going from this wild, crazy, immature young man to a more mature, conscious person of my actions, of the things that I did. So, and in that, it has been a struggle too, because you're so used to always taking shortcuts and doing bad things, and when you're actually trying to do something righteous or do something totally different, it has its expectations to it. It has its trials, and it's ironic because sometimes you expect special treatment for doing something that other people have been doing all their lives. So I had to also learn that no, I didn't deserve special treatment just because I'm finally doing what everybody was doing to start with. Yeah. So, but like I've told you, much respect to people who can write a book. It is a very big challenge to get. I mean, because you know what you want to say, but that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it down on paper the same way you said it. So, anyone that can complete a subject or something like that, hats off. I'm not too good with that kind of stuff, but I'm working on it. I have a lot of ideas, and I just think it's just whatever you do, as long as you enjoy doing it, and as long as you feel like you're benefiting someone else, that's my philosophy, basically.
Well, I agree, and I think that's interesting because when you talk about minorities, whether they're Hispanic, Middle Eastern, Asian, African American, all trying to sort of fit into this middle class, upper middle class structure, and it's like when you have to resist so many dysfunctional pressures in the family, in your community, and you actually end up as a upstanding citizen, you want to pat yourself on the back and say, hey, look at me, I've actually achieved something. But then no one's giving out gold stars just because you're a rational, normal human being.
Right. I mean, it's common. It's expected, and but it's a learning process in that too, because I've met a lot of interesting people since I've decided to kind of live my life differently, and you.
Well, how do you mean differently?
Well, you look back and you think about what you were doing when you were 22, 23, 24.
Yeah.
Most of your life consisted of hanging out with your friends, going to the next party, or doing dumb stuff with your guys.
Yeah.
But then, like I remember something, I don't know if it came from the movie Cloud Atlas or where it came from, but I remember it said something like, the way you see things in life when you're 16 and 17 may not be the same way you'll reflect on that 20 years from now. So the way you see things at 40 might not be the same way you see things at 20.
Of course.
So I definitely can see the maturity level in me rise as I've gotten older. And I can also sadly see where people my age have not grown up at all.
Yeah.
So it's amazing how that can be sometimes.
Well, I mean, 20 to 40 is like a light year. It's a quantum leap right there. And
But to me, it's like yesterday. That's what's so ironic. I mean, I definitely can tell some differences, don't get me wrong. But I really don't feel that much different than I did 20 years ago. I mean, I feel a lot more healthier, and I definitely feel like I've obtained a lot more knowledge than what I had 20 years ago. But it's so weird. I have a friend who's 18. He's a rapper. And when I look at him, I just see myself 20, 30-something years ago. And it's just that drive, that dedication, just that naiveness of not knowing what's next.
Yeah.
I forget.
Sort of freshness and innocence.
Yeah, that innocence in life, So I envy that, and it's so weird how quickly we can go from 21 to 40, And it's just like, whoa.
It's like in a blink of an eye, it's gone.
But there's also some coolness about getting old, too. I mean, African Americans are usually not expected of a long life expectancy, especially when I think of where I came from and who I hung out with and the things that I did, especially, in gangs and drugs and things of that nature. So anybody, in my opinion, that came from my neck of the woods who has made it out and who has made something for themselves, and not necessarily nothing to do with fame or anything like that, but just someone who can say, hey, I'm not in prison, I'm basically living life on life's terms. That's an achievement, especially in Southern America.
And especially considering how the African American male has a sort of deconstructed or just, it's fallen apart in the past few decades because of the economic pressures. We've lost our jobs, the influence of crack cocaine, the police oppression, police brutality. Then the gang life. Essentially, you look at the African American male like in the mid 50s compared to the African American
endangered species.
Yeah, exactly. We're like an endangered species, and that's why a lot of us can get so upset about just how tough things have gotten.
Right. But I think the biggest thing I've seen in my people so far is we have this big issue with feeling like we have to be a somebody. We tend to really, really care about what people think about us. And you can see that in the fashion, in the shoes, and the slang, the persona that most black men carry, this macho, I'm all that in a bag of chips mentality. But, that kind of stuff, it's not going to change your community. It's not going to get the pawn shops and all the liquor stores out of your community. We still have this sense of no snitch mentality, and you don't want to snitch, but at the same time you complain about your neighborhood being infested with drugs and prostitution and things of that nature. How can you expect there to ever be change if you're not willing to be the first one to speak up and say, you know what, I've had it, I don't want this in my neighborhood anymore. So neighborhoods that are so-called white neighborhoods or better neighborhoods are that way because the people who lived there did whatever they needed to do to ensure that neighborhood would be there. I'm a black male, and I'm here to tell you, if I ever saw somebody walking around here smoking crack or doing something of that nature, not only am I going to call the police, but I'm going to go to them personally and say, hey, can you take that somewhere else? Because I do believe in it takes a village to raise a nation.
Exactly. And see, the village was invented by black people in the first place, in Africa.
Right.
So, we created a model of the close-knit tight community where you watch out for each other. You care for each other.
Right.
And this whole idea of not snitching, I mean, all that really is about is, I'm not going to turn you into the white man.
Right.
But that's not that's not a carte blanche to just do all these dysfunctional things, like become a drug addict and just wasting your life away.
Right.
But then, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, obviously, you are, you're responsible. Right. You have managed to have a stable family life.
Right.
So that's rare.
Yeah. But it's also rewarding too.
Yeah.
I think I'll admit there seems to be a big difference in living in a Democratic state versus a Republican state, because I'm here to tell you, life has been
like Alabama versus Oregon. Oh yeah.
Life has been. I mean, I guess because Oregon is practically 50 years ahead as far as technology, everything when it comes to the South, and the South still is a Bible Belt, fend for yourself type mentality now.
Yeah.
And it makes some strong people, but it also puts you in a situation where you end up doing stuff that you shouldn't do in order to make it.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't.
Well, I mean, you do things because of survival, and you're pressed to the edge all the time.
Right. And nobody should have to live like that. And that's why I didn't want my son to have to choose if he's black or white. You can't be a mixed kid in southern states like that, in my opinion. Not without you somehow choosing a side. And up here, he can just be Malachi. He doesn't have to be white. He doesn't have to be black. He has that equal balance between the two.
Yeah.
And that's kind of rare, too, in mixed relationships. But I like it up here because the race situation is 10 times more relaxed than it was where we came from.
Nice.
We get more smiles and waves than the dirty looks like we used to get.
Well, plus, I mean, you got to consider Portland is like, the hippie land that never died.
Right. And,
so people are friendlier here.
Protest too. They call it Little Beirut because of that.
Really?
Situation.
Okay.
Yeah. Because I think when George Bush came that one time, when he was having one of his election rallies or something, they boycotted him and threw all kinds of stuff at him. So they started calling this place Little Beirut because of that. But
I was listening to NPR, and there was a show where they were talking about the whole federal terrorism task force, and people around here are educated. I mean, they know what's going on.
Yes,
they're really investing in their community.
Well, this is a real big green-free type state. Real big on recycling. Real big on keeping things natural and all. We just had a big debate about whether or not should we have what do they put in water? Plaque or
fluoride.
Fluoride. Right?
Yeah.
And we had a real big battle about that, and if I'm not mistaken, I think they lost the battle. So I think the medical profession felt like it's more beneficial to have fluoride in the water than not.
Yeah.
I mean, we come from a state where there was fluoride, and I can definitely tell you there's been a difference in how our teeth is, but I don't know what the long-term effects are. But
I mean, citizens here are engaged. Yeah. I mean, they take up issues, they organize,
and things like
that.
Yeah, they're real big about. Now, here's something that I thought was very strange when we first got here. It literally took me a month to figure out how to throw away my trash, because they do compost, they do recycle. But the first time we ate chicken or something like that, I think we went to a restaurant, and it was funny. They even did it on a joke for Portlandia, that this place have what's called compassionate farms, where they don't believe in abusing their chickens and stuff like that. They believe in giving them all natural foods.
Yeah, animal rights and everything.
Yeah, and you can, I hate to say it, you can definitely tell a difference from, the chicken that you eat up here versus chicken in other places.
Really?
I mean, I don't know if it makes it a better chicken because they were shown more love, but the chicken tastes great up here, and they're real big about salmon and stuff like that, and conservation. There's a lot of rainforests up here, so they're real big about keeping it natural.
Yeah.
And I really like that.
Which makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
But then, I mean, that makes me wonder, I mean, we were just talking about the Trayvon Martin case, because the verdict came out, last Saturday, and there were protests all over the country today. And you and I, both being African American, I'm racially mixed, we both have these sort of different perspectives on what it means.
Right.
Because, I mean, in my case, I've never really been followed by any authorities. That's because I look Indian, Hispanic, Arabic. I never really been sort of stereotyped as the angry black man. And you don't really have the vibe as the angry black man either.
No.
But then, I mean, so you live in this nice place like Oregon, which has these resources, so you don't have much reason to get angry, as it were, because, you're living sort of a comfortable life here.
Right. Now,
Whereas if you're in Alabama, it might be different.
Right. And I don't want to confuse comfortability with not still standing up for what you
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
I will say that I can get just as passionate about certain topics and things just like anybody else. But what I've learned as I've gotten older, I do try to not always incorporate what happened 400 years ago with what's going on today.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't understand that half of the people that are living today, not only do they didn't have nothing to do with what happened 400 years ago, they don't really even have that much knowledge of it to start with. So I think as black people, we really got to get away from all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm not saying that we should forget, but I'll give you a perfect example. Just this past couple of weeks, I've been doing a couple of groups on Facebook where I've been talking to a lot of people from London, from the UK, South Africa, and all these places. And it's ironic because the media always gives you this portrayal of Africans as being in mud puddles and poor and supreme.
Because we only see the starving children.
Yeah,
that's
and
it.
Here it is. I've been talking to these people who are very articulate, very educated. They have similar issues just like anybody else. They're just as passionate about their problems and issues that are going on over there. But again, the media only gives you bits and pieces of what's going on versus what's really going on.
And that's because our media is stuck in the 1960s.
Thank you. Yeah, and I ain't gonna lie, I always thought, anytime you think of Africa, you think of the rainforest and animals, but you don't think of a modern Africa.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
Amazing. Yeah.
I mean, you go to South Africa, you go to Kenya, you go to Nigeria, you're seeing modern Africa right there. You're seeing highly intelligent, highly educated Africans who care deeply about their country, about their continent, and are willing to do whatever it takes to fix the problems there.
And they just, but you never see that portrayal on TV. You usually see the National Geographics, people with bones in their hair and all this kind of stuff, and you're thinking, wow, we still live like that. And it's funny, so now that I've been talking to Africans on some of these groups, I even asked them, I said, what does it feel like to be stereotyped by Americans? And they said that they definitely can understand how we may think that they still live in this old barbaric type way, but they said that even people still over there still have some of those same stereotype views about people who come from tribesmen and stuff like that. So a lot of it is just us, never really having an opportunity to talk and get to know someone or interact with that. And I've really enjoyed being able to interact with basically my roots, But, and it's ironic, you would think, talking to someone from Africa would be all about African, but no, no offense, they got some ignorant people over there, just like we got some ignorant people over here. They got some, they're basically just your average normal person. They just have a totally different slang, a totally different dialect, a totally different way of how they look at things. So it's been real interesting meeting people from that region. Yeah,
well, I mean, that's the wonder of the 21st century. We can be global citizens. We can reach through the internet to interact with so many people from around the world, and we discover that they're not much different from us.
I know, not much different at all. I mean, with the exception of the dialect and some of the languages, but it's amazing to hear these people carry on conversations just like you and I. Yeah. But they just happen to be from Africa or from Europe or from somewhere.
And you see, that's the thing. That's why I go back to the Trayvon Martin case, because I President Obama came on just a couple days ago, said he could have been Trayvon Martin, and so we have to have a dialogue about race and prejudice and soul searching, which I think is very valuable. Right. But I think there also needs to be another dialogue about what is the condition of the black community, schooling, the family, fathers, black men in prison. I mean, those real hardcore variables in terms of how communities are structured. And as valid as the Trayvon Martin case is, it's only the tip of the iceberg with regard to the fundamental issues that are out there. Yeah. And yet, does the media talk about that? No.
And I think there needs to be a statewide thing done too, because a lot of people don't realize what the federal government does and versus what the state officials do is two totally different things. Yeah. So with that, you can see a very different class of living just based on a state-to-state basis. For instance, in Alabama, it's especially in the city of Birmingham, it's well known that if you make a certain amount of money, let's just say you make below $40,000 a year, well then you know there's a good likelihood that your child will be zoned to go to a more poorly structured school. But for people who seem to be making $50,000 or more a year, not only are they going to live in the better areas, but they're almost guaranteed to go to the better schools. And the first thing I think that needs to change, I don't have a problem with someone making money with me, but I do have a problem with my son not being able to get the same quality education that your daughter might would get simply because our incomes are different.
Yeah, and we call that geographic destiny, where you end up depends on where you happen to live, and that's just not fair.
Because to me, smart, if you really want to be smart, why wouldn't you want the best educated people around?
Exactly.
If you're educated, you don't have time to be doing crimes and all this other stuff. If you're educated enough to know you can go get a job, you can go get higher education. So I really think that's why I like Oregon. Up here, the quality of education is the same, no matter if we live here or if we live in Lake Oswego. There's not going to be a big difference in education.
Well, and that just shows the value of the state. I mean, Oregon has these progressive thinkers who want to make education as easy as possible for everyone. So they're even thinking of transforming the educational structure so that you don't pay while you're getting it, but you pay after you get it, based on your income. And what that shows is they're thinking of everyone. They're thinking of how to increase access for every person. And that's valuable as a mindset versus sort of the southern mindset is, you are on your own and, good for you if you have a good education, but, the state will do almost nothing to help you.
We got plenty of prisons for you if you don't get
Exactly. And so Oregon invests in education instead of prisons, whereas in the other states you have investing in prisons instead of education. It's a natural trade-off.
I mean, it's amazing. There's 20 prisons in Alabama, and I think there's only 4 up here in Oregon, and Oregon is twice the size of Alabama. So that just goes to show you what is the level of devotion in that state. They give this persona of being a Bible Belt state. But at the same time, I mean, when it comes to simple things, education and stuff like that, there's a serious gap between whites and
blacks. And I'm betting that there's a serious gap in terms of just how the community deals with education as well. Because I'm betting in Oregon you have families that read intensely to their kids, go to community libraries often, just really invest in the kids' understanding right from the start. Whereas I bet in Alabama you probably don't have that.
But they don't have the time. I mean, you're living paycheck to paycheck. The taxes are extremely high down there. I mean, it's a bit ridiculous.
They have extreme pressures placed on them.
Yes.
And so because the state in Oregon has, in effect, released the pressures on parents, parents can be parents. And Alabamans maybe not so much.
I'll give you a perfect example. Like up here, it's considered an honor for a man to be a stay-at-home father. But in the South, because of this macho mentality that has always been instilled in men, you're almost seen as somehow being weak. The man is supposed to bring home the bacon, whereas the woman is supposed to stay pregnant and barefoot in the kitchen. That's a Southern mentality. But if the mentality that we have up here, where it's okay and honorable to be a man and take care of your children, was instilled with that down in the South, you'd probably have more men actually taking care of their children. Just because they wouldn't have to feel like they're somehow less than because they decide they want to stay home with their children. I think any parent should want to, be able to help take care of. I mean, whoever feels like they're the better person who could be the nurturer for something like that, cool. But it should be to where if a man decided he wanted to do that, his character shouldn't be judged because of it.
Exactly. And so we need to have not just a serious dialogue about race, but a serious dialogue about community and a serious dialogue about what it means to be a man, what it means to be a man in terms of serving your community, having the capacity to take care of your family, your employer, your employees, yourself, all simultaneously. There shouldn't be trade-offs in those.
No. But don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to say that everything in the South is bad. I mean, I've got some decent memories from there. There's still pretty good people down there that would give you their shirt off their back.
Of course.
But
like everywhere.
I think the pressures of, there has been a lot of corruption with our city officials and senators. I mean, one of the main reasons why our school system is messed up is because $10 million back in 98 was somehow lost. And the people who was responsible for that money, for some reason, of course, they can't find it. But we all know somebody spent that money.
Yeah.
And the schools, some of the schools that I went to school to, these kids are sharing books. The walls were coming apart. How can you expect a child to want to be educated and he feels like he's literally sitting in a dump?
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of things could be better. And
well, I mean, that's the value of your experience,
right.
Because you came from an environment and a situation which was undesirable, at least from your perspective.
Right.
You changed it. You're in a better place now. You can look back 20 years later and say, I'm glad I made that change. Now I know objectively needs to be improved.
Right.
And with the perspective of the roles you play now in your community, you have, in a sense, the moral authority to make those claims.
I just want my son to be able to look back one day when he's older and say, well, hey, my dad did this, my dad did that. Not just, I was the biggest pimp or the biggest pusher on the street. I want him to be able to go back and look and say, well, man, my dad really cared about important issues of his time back then. Something kind of like a roadmap or a blueprint that he can follow.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave my son.
Well, you're trying to model fatherhood. You're trying to model what it means to be truly masculine.
Right.
And I think what you and I both agree on is that to be truly masculine is to be a kind of global citizen.
Right.
To really care about your community, about your family, and yourself, and to integrate all those into having a stable environment around you.
Right. Yeah, so that's me, in a nutshell.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, very good.